In the Odyssey, we talked about how the Polyphemus episode, the Cyclops episode, is interesting from the point of view of encounter with other cultures, because here we see a very arrogant Odysseus who is narrating himself this tale of these barbaric Cyclops. If you read the passage sort of against the grain, you can see that they aren't quite so as barbaric as Ulysses makes them out to be. And I think a similar thing emerges in this case, that the curse, Adamastor's curse, gives voice to those who feel that this new Portuguese colonization is maybe not the best thing ever for the colonized.
It's a mixed blessing, and probably, and really interesting, not necessarily the best thing for the colonizers themselves.
Yes, right.
So interesting that curse is there. And you have this parallel when Camões are just setting out. There's this old man in Belém, in this port suburb of Lisbon, who has several stanzas warning them, don't do this. It's too much pride, it's too much conquest, it's waste, it's causing suffering out in the world. So the old man is really saying, you're going to harm the people out there. Adamastor is saying, you are going to suffer.
Yeah.
So that you have this pair.
Right.
And again, that stark realism of the old man, it makes me quite happy to think that the old man has exactly the structural place that the old man in Gilgamesh, the city of Uruk, has, just when he's going out to the cedar forest. He said, don't do this dangerous enterprise. Now, Camões could never have known of Gilgamesh, and yet these themes and these structural narrative moments are percolating through the culture thousands of years later and reappear here.
So, on the one hand, enormous pride and exploration also in Gilgamesh, and daring, and then the fear that it is hubris.
That's
that
right.
Terrible
and when Camões is writing, you've had a period of several decades of economic decline. There's a huge boom with the early trade, and Portugal for a generation particularly monopolizes the trade from East Asia and the Indian Ocean over to Europe. So for example, when Vasco da Gama goes with his 4 ships, and takes him a couple of years to come back, it's a long voyage, and loses 2 of his 4 ships, a bunch of his men, even with all that expense, the profit he makes was 60 times the cost of the entire expedition, because pepper, cinnamon, it's like gold. It's a value of gold and pretty light. You can carry a lot of it in a ship. And other spices and sandalwood, and then it becomes Brazil wood, rosewood from Brazil. These precious woods, sandalwood, which is useful for perfumes also. So you're really bringing back these luxury items that are huge value added for the upper classes in Europe. So there's a huge economic boom. Also gold and silver. The thing is, the Spaniards get more gold and silver and gradually win out over the Portuguese, but for several decades. Then there's this decline, and by the time Camões is writing, 1860s up to 1872, when he publishes it, it's a period of decline and fear and growing encroachment. So he's thinking about these sort of ambiguities of this whole enterprise.
At the same time, there's much in this poem, and especially if we read it with modern eyes, that seems very sort of rah, 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 Portuguese nationalism. We are better than anyone. We have gone further than anyone. It also has that, which is why it's a kind of the national epic.
Yes.
It's odd, this combination of the boastful, hyperbolic, hyper-nationalism. We the Portuguese. And then at the same time, these moments of reflection or uncertainty, ambiguity of the whole enterprise.
That's one of the things that makes, I think, world literature so fascinating. These great works have many levels. You can see them in different dimensions, and just when you think you've got him pinned down on one thing, then there's something radically different. And I think also part of the interest of thinking about a Portuguese text now, we start out talking about this kind of marginal small country and its relations. So we see how nationalism is created not just by developing your nation, but by a rivalry, a relation to a wider world, both a world right around you and a global world, and you're sort of mobilizing the strengths you have. And there's an interesting moment in one of the places where he says, he uses the classical term for Portuguese, Lusitanians. And in one stanza he says, as Lusitanians went out, they came back Portuguese. They get tested. They become themselves abroad.
Yeah, in this exploration.
Yeah.
And so in terms of these various kinds of rivalries, so there's the local rivalry with Spain, and that plays a role. And then there's the religious rivalry with Islam.
Which is equally an economic rivalry.
Right. And then the exploration. It seems worth perhaps pointing out that at least in this phase, the Portuguese are not out to colonize huge areas of land. They stay on the coast, they open trade routes, they want to secure trade routes, but they have no interest in settling
Partly
land.
because they know they don't have enough people.
Yeah.
It's a small country. They
Right.
can't send hundreds of thousands, or even tens of thousands. They just don't have the manpower, and not even the linguistic reach, at least at first. And the rivalry also is with other European powers, also religious. So there's a very interesting point late in the epic where Camões talks about these countries that are going to fall behind, like Germany, which has separated itself off from the great Catholic Church, these German Protestants. So you also have the kind of counter-Reformation aspect with Camões, that we are going to be the bearers of Catholicism against the countries in the middle of Europe that are losing it. And there's a very interesting parallel with the Spaniards. Bernardino de Sahagún, the great early ethnographer of colonial Mexico, has an amazing moment in the preface to one of his books in which he says, well, God gave us access to all of these millions of American souls to make up for the loss of Germany. He actually says that. Counter-Reformation.
Yeah.
We are going to now move out of the world to make up for the actually sort of diminishment of Catholic Christianity as they see it in Europe itself.
Conversion as such doesn't play a large role in here, however.
Nor
Interesting.
conquest as such. Exactly those two things that the Spanish are obsessed with.
Yeah.
They're not so concerned, the Portuguese. It's much more about trade and about kind of establishing identity. And there's even a moment where the good Muslim king or Islamic king of Melinde is the fantasy of what the good native is. The good native doesn't want necessarily to become a Christian, though there's some of that rhetoric, but it's not that important. The good native really wants to trade with you and will show you the trade routes. Very, very important.
Yeah.